demo is going to be on doing a double wedding ring. And I know everybody hears those words and they go, because, yeah, I don't want to do that. Usually, I don't want to do that because traditionally, double wedding ring quilts are either hand-pieced or, thank you, Judy Niemeyer, foundation pieced and beautiful. But a lot of people don't prefer foundation piecing. Even though I'm trying to change your mind, not everybody loves that. So, Quilter's Paradise has designed a line of rulers that make a double wedding ring not only possible, but kind of simple without foundation piecing and without English paper piecing and without hand piecing and without cutting out templates by hand. And the pattern that comes with the rulers or with the templates gives you multiple designs. So here's just a little table runner if you just want to like see if you like making a double wedding ring quilted thing. You can just do a table runner, but the pattern also gives you directions to make, I think, 3 different size quilts as well. Let's see, I remember, yeah. So you can make one that has, you know, a double wedding ring is one block that's turned in a circle, and so it makes a bigger block. So you can make the big block with 8 blocks, or you can make it, you know, you can make it as many as you want. So this one's 48 by 80, it's 40 by 60, 40 by 80, 60 by 80, because the block ends up being just a little over 10 inches. So what we're gonna do is show you how to make, where'd my block go? This. And I made this with the rulers and just some batiks. The idea behind this block is that I'll make this 4 times and you alternate these corners so that it goes blue, gold, so that this element is a separate element altogether. The other thing that I like is if you don't want to do the different colors here, you can do it as a solid piece too. And all of the templates are in the package. Okay, so without further ado, here we go. We're going to show you how to do a non-foundation pieced double wedding ring. Okay, so in your package, you're going to get, you know, in the package, there is all of these pieces. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces to this template set. I'm showing you the hardest, the one that I think is the hardest of the cut right rulers, because if you can do the hardest ones, then you can definitely do the easier ones. And if the hard one freaks you out, then I'm going to show you some simpler ones at the end of the video that you might want to try first. That would be kind of a good jumping off point. They've just come out with a couple of new rulers too. They've got an apple core ruler and oh, there's like 3 other ones that they've just come out with that I don't even have in the store yet, but we'll be getting them soon. All right, so as we usually do when we do demos is I'm going to give you some tips and tricks on how to make this, you know, get the best results. Also in the package, they give you some non-slip tape. It's like slip stop tape. It's almost like skateboard tape. It's really, really scratchy and super sticky. So it's double-sided, not double-sided, but sticky-sided no slip tape. So you just cut off a section, peel off the paper and stick it on the back of your ruler if you don't want it to slip. That's one way to keep your rulers from slipping. I would also be inclined to maybe use some grippy spray on these if you don't want them to slip. I don't have too much slippage because the pieces are small enough, but if you're getting slippage, there is some tape in the package that will help with that, or you could use the grippy spray. So the first thing I'm going to show you is some cutting techniques. Now, like I showed you in this block, you can patchwork the rings so that you could do this with all different colors. This is a really good time to use a strip set, a 2.5 inch strip set, because you're going to cut up squares first. So this is the piece, this sort of little trapezoid shape is the piece that makes these elements. So what I did was I just cut some squares, and then I'm going to show you how to trim them down. So since this ruler finishes 2 inches, If you had a strip set that you wanted to make a wedding ring with, this would be a really good time to do that. If you don't want to do that and you just want to do the whole pieces like this, you can. My intention with this quilt is to do half of it with the patchwork and half of it with the solid so that it looks a little bit like a 4th of July table runner. I'm going to show you how to cut each of the elements out because there is some tips with each one. I probably wouldn't cut more than 2 pieces at a time unless you're super comfortable with your cutting skills. Now, when you're using this template, the pieces are straight, so you could just use a regular rotary cutter. For all of the other ones, there is a curve to the element, so I would probably use a 28mm or an 18mm cutter. So that's the one I'm going to use for this whole project. You'll notice a couple of things about this piece. One, there's a hole in it. That's so that once you take it out of the package, you can put a ring around it and hang it on your ruler rack so that you can find the piece again. The other thing you'll notice is there's little slits in the sides. I know that's weird, but stay with me, okay? This is why they call them slit and sew templates, because each piece you're going to slit little markings. So that means there's no pinning, which I'm a fan of. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut this piece out. Cut 2 sides. If you have a turning mat, this is a good time to use it. I don't have one in my studio space, so we're just going to turn it around. We're going to cut all 4 sides. This is another reason I like to use the smaller rotary cutter, is because in these little slit sections, you're just going to take your cutter and you're going to punch that out. All right? You can use a 45 for this too, but the 28 just sort of fits down in there better. And honestly, you're just going to make, you can almost hear it go pop when you push that down in there. Okay? So now what we have is 2 trapezoids, and you see that little slit in there? That's how much you cut into it. The reason that you use your rotary cutter instead of scissors is it stops you from cutting within that seam allowance space. Okay? So this is the shape that's easiest to show the slit, and so that's why I went ahead and cut it, and that's why I did a light color and then a dark color. So you can see that cut in there. Okay? So that's the little trapezoid shape, and that is if you want to patchwork your rings. All right? The next piece that we're going to cut is this shape here, which is, oh, I can't remember what this shape is called, but it's the thing that locks the rings together. It's this element here, okay? Same thing, I just started with some squares. Oh, another thing I forgot to point out. There is a grain line marking on every single one of these. This is important, especially since almost all of the templates that they make for you deal with curves. You want to make sure that this line here, so if this is your jelly roll set and this is the edge of your jelly roll piece, that double-sided arrow needs to line up with the edge of your jelly roll piece. Don't put it on there like this. For this particular piece, it won't be that bad, but for other pieces, you will not be a happy camper. Okay? So this is the same idea. We're going to cut all 4 sides. This has a curve to it. So even when you don't feel the curve when you're cutting, I promise you it's there. So on a couple of the other pieces, I'm going to point out a little bit more specifically to cut the curve. The other thing I want you to notice is there is an engineered point here, here, and here. If there's a little blunted point, you need to cut that off. That's your guides for where everything lines up. So when I cut these out, I just kind of go all the way around and I cut off the engineered points as I go. Because oddly, they're easier to know that you cut them off when you're cutting off more than just that tiny little corner. And then we're also going to punch our little sides out. I go ahead and punch them out when I cut them so that I don't have to go back and do it later because I forget. Okay? So now see again, there's your little slit. Those slits are very important. Okay? So there's our element E. Now, this part, let's get rid of that trash. This part is your ring. Now, you can either use this as one whole piece, like I did with these red sections, or I'm going to show you in a second how to use it in the pieced element. Now, see my grain line? See how that's going sideways on a curve? This is very important. So in the pattern, it will tell you how wide of a strip you need to cut for each piece. So I've already cut my strip the width that the pattern said to cut it. I'm going to take, and I want to make sure that these arrows are lined up with the straight of grain. Okay, so I actually take this and line it up with the straight of grain on the edge of my fabric and then just slide it straight up.
Angie, let me ask.
Straight of grain is preferred. It can be the length of the grain, but straight is preferred. So remember when we talked about ripping fabric, I showed you that one side doesn't stretch at all, the other side stretches some, and bias stretches a lot. So straight of grain is preferred. If for some reason you're not entirely sure which was the straight of grain, lining it up with the selvage is best practices because that's usually the straight side. If you're not sure, pick your fabric up and take one length of it and then pop it. Hear that sound? That's the straight of grain. When you're on the cross grain, hear how different it sounds? It's okay, but it stretches just a little bit more than on the straight. It's not a deal breaker. Do not just grab a scrap out of your bin that you're not sure which way the bias is. You do not want to cut it that way. And I'll show you why. Because if this is on the straight of grain here and you slide it up, now look at what's on the bias. That's the point of this, is that this ends up on the bias. So it's not a deal breaker if this is this way or this is this way, so long as this curve is on the bias. Okay? All right. Now, when we're cutting this one, here's some tips for cutting this one. I cut the engineered point off first, just because then I can see that it's a whole cut. This doesn't look like there's a curve, but there is. So if you ride the edge of the ruler instead of looking at it, you'll get a better cut. There's a little engineered point there, and then the same thing along this inside curve. You're just going to kind of slowly cut all the way up. There's a little engineered point there, and this has a very slight curve to it. Okay? Now I'm going to turn this around because I don't like cutting toward myself. You have a nice, very slight curve here and a very slight curve here. This is an obvious curve. Make sure that you're cutting off those engineered points all the way around. Okay? So now this is garbage. I'm going to make sure that I go and punch out every single one of these little slots. Now I'm using batik, which means I can just cut them out and not have to worry about which side is the right side, upside, downside. It doesn't matter because it's batik. Okay? It does matter that you snip these out. See, I'm just pushing it down and I can feel it because the fabric's a little spongy. Now, when I'm cutting out these sections, if I start with a square and I know that this is the straight, I can come back and cut a whole nother piece out of this side. So there's not a whole lot of waste here. Okay, so by the time you trim that out, this is all you're going to waste. Now, if you've already patchworked your trapezoid pieces together like this, this is kind of a messy arc. You then use this to trim it down. Now, what I would probably do if I was making a whole bunch of these is I would take a piece of tape and mark a line where this one is and where this one is so that they're even. So you could use some glow line tape or some patchwork tape just so that when you go back, so I forgot to bring my patchwork tape out, but I would probably give myself a little reference point of where these pieces end so that it's even. It doesn't matter that much because by the time you put them together, they're not going to be touching each other. But one thing you do want to pay attention to is you don't want any of these slits on a seam because you want to be able to see the slits when you cut them. Okay? So like here, this one's on a slit. So we're going to want to slide that over a little bit, probably a little bit this way. Okay? Now I'm going to trim this down like I did before. And I want to make sure that I follow all those curves, even the ones you don't know are there. You can't see them, but you can feel them. Okay? Now this engineered point is really small. So I go ahead and cut it when I'm cutting a big piece, just so I make sure I get them all. All right, I'm going to punch these out. Anywhere that there's a slit, make sure you cut it. Turn it back around. Line it all up. Make sure, again, don't forget to ever cut these engineered points. You need them. And then we're going to cut these little notches. Okay? So for the sake of ease of demoing, I'm going to demo the solid piece, but this is how you make that arc. Pretty cool, right? All right, now here comes the weird part. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to build a block that looks something like this. You have this outside pie crust. Remember, we talked about that a couple weeks ago. And you have your inside pie piece. Oh, I forgot to show you how to cut these pieces. You've got your inside melon, your outside crust, your outside pie, your outside crust, and then you have these sort of diamond pieces in the corners. Okay? Now, I want to point out when you're cutting these pieces, I wanted to cut all the pieces for you because they all have their own little tips. This piece starts with, the pattern gives you exactly what size to cut it. So if you cut this one, make sure you're cutting these sides and get your big swoop here. You can cut these two at a time because they are going to be opposites of each other. So that part's okay. But when you cut these two pieces out, and I won't, cut both of them. But when you cut this piece out, and then normally I would cut a pressed piece, I didn't realize there was a fold. And you cut this side out, your melon piece now is on the straight of grain in the middle. Okay, so here's your arrow line, and there's the top, there's the line of your fabric. So this whole piece of fabric is not wasted. You cut your melon out of there. Again, make sure you engineer the points and cut those notches out. Okay? That's how you cut all the pieces. Now, here's the block we're going to build. We're done cutting. We're going to build this block. It seems counterintuitive. Most of the things I'm going to show you today seem counterintuitive, but just stick with me for a minute. We're going to take, see this engineered point on the red part there? And we're going to match it up with the straight part on this edge. Now, I don't bother matching this at the cutting table because it's going to wiggle by the time I get to the machine. A scant 1/4 inch is your friend here, so make sure that you have you understand how to get to a scant 1/4 inch on your machine. See the notches in the red and the notches in the white? You're not going to pin anything because you're going to match up the notches. That's kind of hard to do until you get to sewing. So we're going to take this straight edge and we're going to line it up with the straight edge of this outside. Then when I go and put this in my machine, There's a lot of zhuzhing that happens with this process, and I'm going to show you where to do the zhuzhing. Now, I don't know if Steve can get in there far enough to see where my needle is going to drop down is right on the point of that engineered corner. Okay? So I'm just going to take about 2 stitches, just enough to lock it in. Then I can fuss with it. So if I take my 2, see how my 2 notches are lined up right there? If I match those notches up, and then it doesn't matter what's happening over here. Don't worry about what's happening over here yet. We only care about what's happening right here. I'm going to hold this flat with my finger, kind of taut. And then I'm going to zhuzh the top bit of fabric until it lines up with the piece on the bottom and the notches line up. And then I'm just going to sew until I get to the notches. And then I'm going to stop. If you have a pivot function on your machine, this will make you so happy. If you don't have pivot function on your machine, this is a good time to get out your knee lift. Okay? This machine has pivot, so I don't have to do anything else but stop sewing. Here's my next set of notches. See the notch in the white and the notch in the red? I'm going to match those notches up. And I'm going to hold my finger there where the notches are, and I'm going to take the red piece and I'm going to slide it over so it's right on top of the white piece. And then I'm going to sew. Same thing with the next one. So we're just going to keep matching these notches up all the way around our curve. Put your finger down, hold it tight, pull the red piece over so that it lines up with the white piece, and sew. So the little notches that are in the fabric, let everything open up enough that you can sew a straight line, and it gives you the exact points that everything's supposed to line up, so you don't have to pin anything. God, I hate pinning curves together. It's so tedious. This isn't though. You literally just match the next notch up and then sew what, you know, sew that little section. And I'm going to go like this all the way to the end. Now, when I get to this last notch, I want to match up this engineered point with the flat spot on my pie or on my crust. You're going to have a little part that you can see, but just a little bit, just like a barely little, like peeking through kind of notch. Okay. And I'm going to sew right off the end. And if you aim for, this is the point I was talking about at the beginning, that little point right there is exactly where your needle should go onto the fabric and where it should come off. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do to press this, we're going to press this toward the crust. So see how those notches open up now to make that curve happen? I also really enjoy steam with this process. Anytime I'm working with bias, I do turn on the steam on my machine, on my iron, and I'm just going to press that white outside part out. Now what you end up with is a perfectly 90-degree square piece out here and an inside curve. All right, so this is the ring part of your double wedding ring. Now, when I'm putting the inside piece on, we're going to do the exact same thing. This feels really counterintuitive, but it's okay. See that weird little notch right there? And this flat spot right here? We're going to match those two pieces up. I know this feels icky because this piece is going that way and this piece is going that way, but it'll be okay. So we're going to come back to this happened to stick together really nicely. And we're going to start sewing right there where that little notch is. Now, again, I'm going to get everything lined up right. I'm going to take about 2 stitches. Then I'm going to bring these together and I'm going to find my notches. So there's that notch and there's that notch, and I'm going to match them up. And now we've got white on the top, so we're going to zhuzh the white bit over to cover the red. And do the same thing with the next bit. Okay, match up my little notches, hold it tight, and pull this over. There's a lot of pulling and tugging here, but it's better than pinning and cussing. So there's my notches, there's my notches. And there's the last notch. And even if you have to pull on one piece of fabric or the other to get the notches to match up, that's okay. And we're going to sew to that one. Now this is another one where here's the engineered point again. And we want to match it up with this corner here. Okay? We're going to match it up flush, and it's going to feel like it's too big, but it's not. Okay? So we're going to match those two pieces up so they're flat. Pull the white piece over and sew off the end. Okay? There's that piece. Now we're going to press this toward the white fabric again. Again, I've got my steam on because I want my steam to make everything lay really flat. Now, I want to point something out here. This part I could feel it flip over. Look at how perfect that is. Which seemed really weird when we first put it on there, right? Because one piece was going that way and one piece was going this way, and it looked like, yeah, that's not going to happen. But it did. Now, I already made the other half. We're going to do the same thing. I don't see any point in showing you the same thing. We're going to take this one and add it to the other side. I'm going to show you how to put these pieces on next. I've already put one on. We're going to put these little pieces on in the corner. So this is where we are right now, and our block is already almost done. Check it out. Okay? So we're going to take these two pieces and put them together. Same thing here. We need this point. So basically when I put this piece on, I've got this soft curve here and this 90-degree angle here. So I'm going to line these 2 points up. So here's that little engineered point. There's the point of the white part of my block. Again, it feels icky because this is not lined up. It's okay. The secret to making this work is to line up your block and get, well, it helps if you get it in the right spot, and get those first 2 stitches in to hold it where you want it. Then match up those notches. So see, here's the notch in the blue one and here's the notch in the red one. We're going to match up those notches. Even though it feels a little awkward to get them together, it will work. Okay? We're going to match those 2 notches up and we're going to sew to that point. Then I've got these 2 engineered points are going to match up to this side. And again, you have all these curves happening, so you kind of have to make it do what you want it to do, but you don't have to pin it. We like that. Now when I press these, for the most part, and the directions are very good about pressing directions, for the most part, I'm pressing toward the new piece that I added. But now I want to point something out here. You've got your seam allowance here because part of this is going to get sewn off when you add the blocks together. That's what's going to give you the diamond shape. You want that. So now I'm going to take my 2 that have the diamonds and add them to my other pie piece. Same thing of matching up this engineered point of the white and the yellow. And this is why you have all those notches even in the little pieces, because when you go to put them together, you don't know where the next piece is going to necessarily match up. So you've got to have all of the notches in the right place. These things are very well engineered. So I'm going to sew to the notch. My next notch is the white and the red to match up. So here's that notch. Here's this one. So we're going to match those two notches and hold them together. And then I need to make them match up. Okay. Match the next ones. You see a pattern here? This seam is probably the most challenging because you have patchwork involved, but if you just take your time and mess with it till it gets there, it'll all lay out nice. Plus I want to make sure my seam allowance lines up here. Now here's another notch between the red and the blue. So we're going to match those two. Line up the pieces. And so when you get to the end of this one, you're going to have a little ear that sticks out, and that's normal because what you're actually trying to match up is the engineered point of the blue and the red. And you can't really see it. It's underneath here. So here's my tip for this part. I lost my scissors. No, here they are. Is to take and snip off this white section here so that you can see. Of course, I picked up the worst scissors in this whole space. You want to match up the engineered point of the blue and the red, not the white. Okay? And then you sew off the end. Okay? Now I typically will press toward whatever the solid piece is, which is usually the white. The reason for that is that's usually the way it just wants to go. And it'll tell you which way it wants to lay. And just let it do what it wants. It's easier than fighting it. So now you end up with this really easy, pleasing arc of a block. And I usually will go back the other side because sometimes these slits will make it to where it wants to go one side or the other. That's okay. Just let it do what it wants. I do like to go back and repress everything from the back though. I'm just weird like that because I like everything to lay really flat. It's probably the long armor in me. But look at how you have a very nice, very square block now. So you can do it with the full arches, or you can do it with the patchworked arches, or you can put the two together. Okay? So if you put the two together, these things here go together and make a secondary diamond patch, and you get those double wedding ring shapes. Isn't that cool? I first saw them at market years ago and bought, I think it was the apple core one, and I played with the apple core ruler. Then they started coming out with multiple different blocks, which are really cool. My favorite one though, and the one that I sell the most of, is this double wedding ring. And in fact, my aunt called me about 2 months ago, 3 months ago, and she said, I gotta make a wedding quilt and I wanna make a double wedding ring. And I said, are you even a quilter? And she's like, no, but my friend's getting married, so I wanna make one. And I'm like, well. So I sold her this template set and I sent it to her, and I picked out fabric and I sent her all the fabric and whatever. And she's like, oh yeah, I think I could figure this out. So she made a queen size double wedding ring quilt, and then she sent it to me to quilt it. And it was shocking how, for a beginner, how well that quilt came out. And it was beautiful. So if you want to make a wedding ring quilt and you're kind of like breaking out in hives about it, I would definitely recommend this technique. If you want to try a different ruler that will let you kind of practice with it, I'm going to show you some of those too. You got a question?
Well, what foot were you using?
I was using my 1/4 inch foot because I use my 1/4 inch foot almost exclusively if I'm doing any sort of patchwork. We've talked about this in the past about getting a scant 1/4 inch. Personally, I get my best scant 1/4 inch if I use a 1/4 inch piecing foot with a guide and then bump my needle over like a 1/2 millimeter. I get a scant 1/4 inch really well with that technique. Not every machine does that. Not every sewer does that. You just have to know where your scant 1/4 inch lives. That's where mine lives. So if you need a 1/4 inch piecing foot and you have a Brother Janome Baby Lock, most other machines besides Bernina, they're on our website. They're like 15 bucks. They totally make things easier. We've got just a couple things to show you. The first thing that we are showing that's up in the window right now is this template set, the one I just showed you, the one that makes the double wedding ring. It is 6 pieces, I believe. 1, 2, 3. It is a 5-piece template set. And the pattern is in here to make the table runner as well as all of the blocks. I can help you with the math if you want. I also appreciate that they give you, you know, how many strips and how wide the strips need to be before you cut your squares apart, because that's the hardest math of the whole thing. It also tells you when it's a good time to use a 10-inch square or a jelly roll or any of those things. Because pre-cuts are kind of fun when you're using these templates, because then you get that scrappy look without really having to overthink it. The secret is to remember that grain line that's on there. So even when you're cutting with pre-cuts, don't put it on the diagonal of the pre-cut unless that's what this line tells you to do. All right? So the first thing that we're showing is the Cut-Rite double wedding ring set. I also showed you that the smaller cutter is really handy for cutting these curves. It's also handy for doing the little punch outs, because you get just the right amount of cut and all you have to do is kind of put it down and punch it out. You don't have to roll it, you can just punch it out. So the cutter is number 101. The wedding ring template was number 100. The cutter is number 101. The other templates that they have, that I have, there are other ones that I'm sold out of, or we have more on the way, like the apple core and whatnot. But the ones I'm going to show you are the ones I have in stock right now. This is the clamshell version. Clamshell quilts are really popular right now, but cutting them out is a hassle, because usually you have a template and you have, you know, either an AccuCut or you're actually cutting them out by hand. But since you can rotary cut this, the template's really nice. So the way the clamshell quilt works is you basically cut out this shape for almost everything. The piece that looks like a pair of panties is how you make the top and the bottom of your quilt square. So you cut out mostly this shape, but this is the piece that goes with it to either make stripes or to make your quilt square. This comes in a 6-inch version and a 12-inch version. I'm sold out of the 12-inch version right now, but I do have the 6-inch one. This is really fun, and I have a couple of patterns on the wall. I've got one called Hydra that is amazing with this. It's really fun to make that curved. They almost look like waves on top of each other. So number 102 is the clamshell template, is this one. And all of them come with that little slip stop tape and directions to show you how to make it. Number 103, I have the Drunkard's Path. If I was gonna pick one to kind of play with and figure out what I liked, the Drunkard's Path is probably the easiest of these versions because there's only 2 pieces. That's why I showed you the hardest one first, because if the hardest one is that easy, then how easy do you think all the rest of them are? Number 103, the Drunkard's Path comes in 4 different sizes. It comes in a 4-inch version, which is the number 103. So the Drunkard's Path is the same thing. This one is great for using with 5-inch squares, because a 10-inch square is even better because you can get both pieces out of one block. This is the 4-inch Drunkard's Path block. But yeah, it works really good if you got some charm packs laying around you're not sure what to do with, because it's the right size. Number 104 is a 6-inch Drunkard's Path. Because these are more like templates than rulers, they are kind of size specific, but they're not very expensive. And the engineering is totally worth all of the things, okay? Again, the directions are in here for making, I'm not sure what size, I don't remember what size quilt this makes, but basically it shows you how to make the blocks and then you make as many as you want. This one works really well with a layer cake or with a 10-inch 10-inch pre-cuts. And then we have an 8-inch Drunkard's Path, so it makes a larger section. This one will also work with a 10-inch square because you can cut your pie crust and then you can cut your other shape. And see how it has the straight of grain on both sides? That's really handy because if you set this on a 10-inch square, you just push it up to the corner and you know you're in the right place. All right, so this is an 8-inch Drunkard's Path. Those are the Quilter's Paradise rulers that I have in right now. We will keep adding them to our arsenal because I really do like them and they really do make it very straightforward and easy to do. So, all right, so that's what I have for this week. I hope to see you guys on Wednesday and on Friday. And I hope you sew some stuff. We'll see you Wednesday.